remember going to my dad and say, Dad, you know what? I'm contemplating, the fire service, but I'm not going to be able to make it in this particular class. So what are the chances of me, going to the military? It was good enough for you and for Mom. He goes, yeah, well, that was different times, son. It was war, And he goes, some young men and women need the military. You're disciplined enough. You don't need it. You've matured into a pretty good young man. And I said, well, I was a little disappointed because I thought, gosh, that I was looking for him for like direction and guidance, and it was good enough for them. And he says, some men need it, but you don't need it. So I kept looking, and I looked into the military again more, and that was the Army that I looked into, and then I looked into the Marines. So I went to the recruiter, talked to the Marines, had nobody in the Marine Corps that I had known, but I just know of the esprit de corps. I understand. I didn't know if I understood what it is. I just liked that type of service, total service. And so I went back to my dad and said, I'd like to join the Marine Corps, Dad. What do you think? He goes, now that's an organization. I said, okay, there's my green light, and boom. I went and took the test for Officers Candidate School, and that was in the summer of 1975, and I was accepted, and I started my training, and then in September of 75, I was commissioned a second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps.
How old are you?
I was 23.
23.
23, getting ready to turn 24.
Okay.
It was the greatest decision of my life.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because, I felt that the Corps was like the best of the best. I mean, all the military services are certainly renowned, even with my mother and father and all the stories, because I would hear a lot of stories from my father's combat experience. Not so much from my mother's, but definitely from my father. And I just felt that calling, that vocal, in Latin there's an expression called voco vocari, which means to respond to the call. And I've been responding to the calls all my life now, it seems like, as I look back. But when I went into the Corps, and all the esprit de corps that comes with it, the history, I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to earn that. And so it was a challenge. Maybe I was looking for that when I tried to get on the varsity football team, but I didn't really capture it. But once I captured those golden bars right there, I know I deserved it because I worked hard. I worked hard for it and was successful. And so I joined the Marine Corps and spent from 1975 to 82. And then eventually went through the ranks, made first lieutenant, second lieutenant, and then captain in the Marine Corps. And that was like a foundation in which I poured my life to a great foundation from a great mother and father that gave me a good, stable educational foundation, a religious foundation, and then a military foundation that made me a man, if you will, a challenge of the crucible. In the Marine Corps, we call it the crucible, that when they give you the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, no one gives that to you. You earn it. So I love that about that. Personal accomplishment. And so I went into the Marine Corps, and as an officer, I was responsible for amphibious assault vehicles, which are kind of from the armored aspect of the Marine Corps. And that was my MOS, and I really, really enjoyed doing that. And then based on how well because every Marine is an infantry officer, everyone, no matter what you want. If you want to be a pilot, you want to be an engineer, you want to be an artillery, you got to be a grunt. And that is the esprit de corps of the Corps, that every one of us as Marines, we're grunts from the beginning. Then after you go through school, infantry school, which was 32 weeks after your commission, then you went into your specialties. Of course, the pilots hated that 32 weeks because they said, we're going to be in the Oak Club at 1600, and you guys are still going to be in the mud, right? So those pilots, but in those cockpits, those guys know what it's like to be on the dirt, in the mud, and the support that they're going to give us. They understood why.
Yeah.
And then we understand why the smarter guys are up in those cockpits, because they're going to bring death and destruction to the enemies that are opposing us. Fortunately for me, I never had any combat experience, but as Marines, we're always prepared for that. And my Marine Corps career was spectacular, and I loved every minute of it. I still stay in touch. I had 6 roommates. 3 were graduates of the Naval Academy, and one good guy came out. We still stay in touch. Unfortunately, we've lost 2 of those 6 of my brothers through cancer, and the other guys we stay in contact even to this day now with their families, and their children have got into the military. So kind of got on a tangent on that, but
So eventually you get out of the Marines, and then you start the fire department.
right, right. I got out in February of 78, and then tested again. And this time I was much more successful. And by August of 75, I had a job offer to teach school in a Catholic high school here in Panorama City called St. Genevieve's, and be a English teacher through my journalism background, and then also coach basketball. That was my.
Did you ever consider, once you got out of the military, did you ever consider going back to the priesthood?
No. Well, while I was still in the Marine Corps, I still had the mindset of what are the best things I ever had in my life. My seminary training was awesome, and my Marine Corps training. So I even had time where I sat with a chaplain, Marine chaplain, who was Catholic priest, and still considered it, even on my way out the door. Still
Okay.
consider it, but I figured, but I didn't, something that made it better for me was, the need for fatherhood and for married life. But I thought the greatest things I experienced was the Marine Corps and my seminary training, and what could be better than being a Marine chaplain?
Yeah.
But God put me in a different direction and showed me the fire department, and He said I can still serve. I can still serve in other ways.
What do you think it is? Do you think it came from your parents, this service? I mean, you go to the military, you serve there. I'm going to serve. You have this desire to serve the people by becoming a fire department. Where do you think that service comes from?
That comes right from my dad. I don't even have to think about it, because my dad, he came from a big family, tough, Ukrainian family, and they were all steel workers in the mills. And my dad, he had that hardcore work ethic. Especially, he's the youngest of all 7 of his brothers, so he was the youngest. And he was a boxer and he was a tough guy. He was a kid growing up with, obviously you had to be with 7 brothers, older brothers, So he was a pretty good boxer, probably saved himself from getting whooped by his older brothers. But my father, he's always teaching us about, think about the other guy. Think about the other guy. Constantly, in a good way. It's like, It's not about yourself.
Yeah.
Think about the other guy. And he was always good about putting that stamp, the imprimatur on my heart. Whatever I was going to do, it was never for myself. It was always for the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
And the Marine Corps certainly was about the other guy, because you work together, and the only way you're going to be successful is care for the welfare of your men and women that are underneath you. And I learned that in the Marine Corps. I mean, to be successful, you have to accomplish 2 things: care for the welfare of your men and accomplish the mission. And you can't do one without the other. Mm-hmm. And I learned that in the Marine Corps, and I brought that over from the foundation that my father poured for me about thinking about the other guy. And then I certainly brought that into the fire department, because in the Marine Corps I had 75 young Marines. I was 24 years old, and I had 75 hard-charging Marines that were 17, 18, 19 years old, plus a senior staff of senior guys. And I'm going to treat my senior guys that were staff sergeants and gunnery sergeants, and then I had the privates and the lance corporals, and so there was quite a balance. And I learned from my platoon sergeant how to care for the welfare of his people and my people. I remember when I first got there, I'm just a young second lieutenant, and I told him after the first week, we finished the first week and got a couple of beers and put them on my desk, and he was a Vietnam veteran, and I said, Gunny, Speciale was his name. I said, meet me in the hooch at 1600, and we can talk about the platoon. And I said, this is not my platoon. I'm the platoon commander. This is not your platoon, because you're the platoon sergeant. This is our platoon. And even as a 26-year-old or 24-year-old, when I first took over, I had that maturity based on what my father taught me about, you might be carrying the lieutenant's bars, but you're not that much older than these young guys who you're responsible for their lives.